ADHD may have saved your ancestors. There are some conditions that seem maladaptive, and we wonder why these genes are still around. But sometimes genes give an adaptive advantage that we might not be aware of. So, as one example, there's a disease called hemochromatosis. And with this disease, a person absorbs more iron from food, and they consequently have much more iron in their blood, and it can lead to cirrhosis and diabetes, cardiomyopathy, joint pain. And people with hemochromatosis, they have to give blood once a week until the condition's under control, and then once every 13 months or so. And it's fairly common. It's about 0.6% of the population has it. And it's actually the most common single gene disorder in people of Northern and Western European descent. So why is this maladaptive condition still so relatively popular in the gene pool? Well, it turns out that those who had hemochromatosis had better chance of surviving bubonic plague. So the bubonic plague was the cause of the Black Death that swept through Europe and Asia and Africa in the 14th century, and it killed about 50 million people. Somewhere between 1/3 and 2/3 of the population of Europe succumbed. It's mostly spread by bites from fleas that were infected with a bacterium. Now, the theory is that those who had hemochromatosis were better able to survive bubonic plague. The high iron content in their blood made it so that the underlying bacterium couldn't get the levels of iron that they needed. And so people with this condition better survived TB as well, TB and bubonic plague. And then those who survived the plague included a much higher percentage of those with hemochromatosis. Incidentally, it might be also why bloodletting was so popular for many centuries, because it actually does help treat hemochromatosis. Now, back to ADHD. Having ADHD similarly might be so common because it was perhaps evolutionarily adaptive. It might have helped ancestors survive. So that might be why the gene is so prevalent in society today. So think of it this way. As hunters, humans need to adapt to ever-changing environments where dangers are unpredictable. And if you are able to focus intently on something, on whatever you're hunting, but then be able to have your attention shift rapidly, this might have allowed you to survive better, to venture out, find a new source of food, but also be really quick to notice that an irate woolly mammoth was barreling down on you, and you get out of the way and you increase your chance of survival. So to investigate this hypothesis, scientists investigated the frequency of a genetic variant of the dopamine receptor, and they looked in two groups in a tribe in Kenya. And some of the people in this tribe were nomadic, and others who split off and settled in one location. The genetic variant is linked to ADHD, and what it does is it makes the dopamine receptor less responsive than normal. Now, the nomadic men that they studied, those who had the less responsive dopamine receptor, the one that's linked with ADHD, they were better nourished than the nomadic men who did not have that ADHD gene. In the tribe that had been settlers for generations, the opposite was true, that those with the ADHD-like gene, the less responsive dopamine receptor, they were more underweight than those without the variation. So what do you think? Does this gene maybe provide adaptive benefits to our sedentary world? Are there certain careers or situations that are best suited to an ADHD type brain?